It's 63 degrees.
Gospel Broadcasting Network, a cooperative effort of Churches of Christ, brings you good news today and every day. No matter what else is happening in the world, there is good news today.
Always good news, good news, good news, there is good news today.
Welcome to Good News Today, the program where you will always find good news, no matter what else is happening in the world. So glad that you are with us for what we call your daily dose of the best news ever, and we'll get to that best news ever as we always do in just a moment, as our reading today comes from the Sermon on the Mount. We'll be turning to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to read verses 38 through 48 in just a few moments. But I want to tell you first of all that this is another one of the special editions of Good News Today that we are featuring, where we are including some outstanding material presented recently at the North Georgia Winter Lectures. Of course, that's a part of the Highland congregation's work. They oversee the Highland Church of Christ in Dalton, Georgia, which also oversees, that congregation oversees the Gospel Broadcasting Network, of which Good News Today is a part. They recently conducted the North Georgia Winter Lectures, some of which were taped right here in our studio and some at the Highland Church building in Dalton. And the theme was, where do I go from here? Well, we're bringing you some of those outstanding messages as a part of Good News Today. You're going to see them first right here on Good News Today. And today's lesson features a man with whom you are very familiar if you are a regular viewer of Good News Today and the Gospel Broadcasting Network, Glenn Colley. Glenn and his wife Cindy have done a great deal of work in helping couples, married couples, to strengthen their marriages. They've written material on the subject, conducted workshops on the subject, where Cindy has helped the women so much, and Glenn with the men and the women as well. But the teaching that you are going to hear on a Christian response to marital conflict, you won't hear anything finer and more pertinent, more practical, and more helpful. It's coming your way. You do not want to miss this message, let me assure you. If you've heard Glenn before, you know you don't want to miss anything that he presents. He does an outstanding job. He's featured regularly on our Make the Most of a Minute segment here on Good News Today, as well as 5 minutes for faith. So that's coming up right after our devotional period, a Christian response to marital conflict. And it's a very unusual approach. It's a very unusual approach to this subject that you will fully appreciate. In fact, some of the very verses that we're about to read together are going to be used in a very unique application to the marriage situation. So be sure and stay tuned for that. Right now, let's get to our scripture reading, and we're going to read Matthew chapter 5. This is a part, of course, of the great Sermon on the Mount, given by the greatest preacher who ever walked the earth, Jesus Christ, and the greatest sermon ever preached. The Constitution of Christianity, it is often called. We're going to read a part of it right now. Matthew 5, 38 through 48. Jesus here says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also." To prevent abuses, this prohibition, an eye for an eye, or the admonition, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, was designed to prevent individuals from taking personal vengeance and going beyond what was right. And it was to prevent abuses of the law. Well, the Pharisees had perverted this part of the law to make it a duty. You didn't have to retaliate, obviously. In fact, the law was, as we said, designed to keep retaliation down and to prevent abuses of the law. It was a regulation that restricted the response, in other words, that a person could have to an injustice or to a wrong done to him. Well, the Pharisees, they didn't make it an option, basically. They had made it a duty. Well, Jesus corrects that thinking as he goes on. But I tell you not to resist an evil person. In other words, don't think that you have to retaliate, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. The Pharisees were abusing what the law intended. But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, excuse me, turn the other to him also. In other words, be one who endures wrong. Now he's not negating any law concerning self-preservation here, because it is clearly a biblical principle that one can defend oneself. And that's not his point here. We don't want to misconstrue what the Lord is saying. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. And if you were going to take that so literally that someone hits you on your right cheek and you turn the other to him, then he hits you on the left, and then you could just beat him up, according to this, if you take this so literally. No, what he's saying is endure wrong. Be of the mindset, be of the attitude to endure wrong. He goes on, reemphasizes this in verse 40. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. Jesus is dealing with an attitude here. The attitude of Christianity, obviously, the Christian spirit. Verse 41 is interesting. Whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. In this particular time in which Jesus uttered this statement, a Roman soldier, for example, could compel one of the Jews, of course, who were subject to Roman authority, to carry part of his equipment, his pack, if you will, for a mile. And the Jew had no option there. He could not refuse. Well, what Jesus is saying here is, whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him too. In other words, well, this principle is sometimes called second mile religion. And the sermon in itself could be preached on practicing second mile religion, going the second mile, doing more than is required as a Christian, as a follower of Christ. Isn't this beautiful teaching here in terms of what it tells us should be a part of our thinking and our actions as a result of that thinking? Whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him too. What kind of impact might that have on a Roman soldier who was compelling a follower of Christ here to take his pack or his equipment for 1 mile? What if he just said, well, I'll not only do that, I'll take it a second mile as well. Well, we know that there were some among Caesar's household who were converted to Christ. They were receptive, some, to the gospel. Might that not have that kind of impact on such an individual? Why, of course, if that individual was thinking as he should. Then he goes on to say, give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. Now, that has to be understood in its proper context, and that there are some who would ask and want to borrow, and the circumstances have to be evaluated, and the situation has to be evaluated. The need has to be determined. We're to be good stewards of what we have. It all belongs to God, and we are good stewards. And good stewards don't just simply give money away indiscriminately without any evaluation of the individual who's asking for it and the need and why he wants it, what it's going to be used for. You see, all of this obviously has to be considered in the context in which it is being given here. Be generous, in other words, the Lord is saying. But He's not saying don't be indiscriminate in giving your money away. You have an obligation to be a good steward of God. Well, you have heard that it was said, verse 43, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Well, what about it? But, and here's another one of those contrasts, but I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. In the lesson that's coming up, that outstanding lesson on marital conflict from Glenn Colley, he's going to make an application here of this particular text that you will not want to miss. And Glenn talks about the fact that, you know, we're not required to have a warm feeling toward those who are truly our enemies and who would do us in, not only do us wrong, but do us in if they could. But we're still to manifest the highest form of love even for our enemies, the agape form of love. That agape form of love means that I will do that which is best for the object of that love, even if that person happens to be my enemy. Even if he's declared himself to be my enemy, I'm still going to do for him that which is best for him. I'm going to manifest that agape love. God so loved the world, in the highest sense of that word love, that he gave his only begotten Son. When we were yet sinners, when we were the enemies of God. And so therefore we must imitate that kind of love. We must manifest that kind of love. We must show that kind of love for even those who are our enemies. And by so doing, we show something that's very significant, very special about a person who's following God and Christ. And Jesus points that out in verse 45, beginning, when he says that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. In other words, do good to those who hate you, pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that, in other words, in order that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. And realize that the Father bestows blessings upon those who are the enemies of God. He makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. There are some blessings, physical blessings, that flow to all mankind, the just and the unjust here. And then he gives a very significant explanation here in verse 46. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? In other words, if my attitude is, I'm just going to do good to those who do good to me, what does that show that's special about being a Christian, being a follower of Christ? Do not even the tax collectors do the same, even those who are not professing to be followers of God, in other words? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Very important question. What do you do more than others? Just take that question in itself. It's a very pertinent, very poignant question. What do you do more than others? How are you set apart? Well, that's what a Christian is. He is set apart, isn't he? He's sanctified, set apart for a holy use. He's to be separate and apart from the world, different than this world. And that's what Jesus is striking at so poignantly here in this great Sermon on the Mount, in this section here about contrast between what you have heard and the traditions of the Pharisees and the perversions of the law that they had been guilty of committing, and getting back to the true spiritual nature of God's law. And of course, that law today is the law of Christ. He concludes with, therefore you shall be perfect, or this part of the sermon concludes here, our reading, therefore you shall be perfect just as your Father in heaven is perfect. He is the standard. He's the standard. And we seek to emulate the Father in heaven, and Jesus Christ, of course, the Son. Yes, indeed. This is a great sermon, the greatest ever preached by the greatest who ever walked the earth. Now then, we're going to join that lesson I have been mentioning that you do not want to miss, as Glenn Colley takes some of these same verses and makes some unique, very pertinent application to the marriage relationship, a Christian response to marital conflict. Here's Glenn Colley.
Marriage is one of the greatest adventures of life. Males and females are two corresponding pieces to the same puzzle. I had lunch today with a man who is thinking about getting married. And I said, you know, here's the truth, is that dating relationship, you learn 50% of a woman, and then you marry and you spend the rest of your life learning the other 50%. And what a wonderful adventure it is. When I was a kid preacher, I used to make this statement sometimes. If we don't get this divorce problem in check in the church, before long, even among God's people, divorce is going to be as common as hamburgers and French fries. I don't say that anymore. And you know why? Because we're already there. That's a surprise to me, because you would think that among all the people of the world who have embraced this idea of flimsy marriages and quick divorces, that the people of God would not be so, that we would be more serious about marriage and divorce. And I think that we are. But nevertheless, we've got a real problem with marriages that are hitting the rocks and breaking up. And what's the answer to that? Well, we could say that the Bible is the best marriage counselor. I believe that's true, but it's far too broad. I mean, the statement's far too broad. One of my hobbies is repairing antique clocks. I've been doing it 20 years. I just really enjoy it. And I had a clock the other day, a 200-year-old English bell strike grandfather clock. And over the years, who knows, somebody had taken some parts from it that, well, you know, a clock doesn't run without all of its parts. And some of them I could fashion myself, I could make myself, but there was one that I didn't have the equipment to make it. And so I live in Huntsville, Alabama. I found a man who was an engineer. A lot of engineers in Huntsville, never met him before, but he has a workshop behind his house. And I took this part and I said, "Can you make this?" And I wish you could have seen him. His hair he looked like a movie character. His hair was all muffed and his clothes were messy and his glasses were on his nose, and he mumbled a lot. And he said, "Well, let me see it." And he takes this micrometer and he begins to measure, and a piece of paper, and he starts writing out equations. I mean, with some symbols I've never seen before. And every few minutes he would hold it up to him and he'd say, "Now check me on this." And I'd say, "Oh yeah, it looks good. That looks really good." And I didn't know what any of it was. And I think sometimes we say to people, you know, you need help with your marriage. You've got conflict in your marriage. And the Bible is the best marriage counselor. But you know what? That's way too broad. What do we mean by that? Well, we need to be far more specific. Let's talk about some real things. All right, for this segment, here's what I want to do. Let's go to the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. The first chapter. You know, the Sermon on the Mount from my Lord is Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And you might be thinking, now Glenn, there's very little in the Sermon on the Mount about marriage, and so why would you go there to teach about conflicts in marriage? Well, it's because of this principle, I believe. Now, you see, I really believe that the best husband in the world is a faithful Christian. I believe that the best wife in the world is a faithful Christian. The answer to marital conflict really is the Word of God. I mean, it really is living the way that Jesus Christ would have us to live. That's the truth. Let's shoot not with a shotgun, but with a rifle. Psalm chapter 1 and verse 1 says, "Blessed is the man that walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful." You know what? We've done that about marriage. We've listened to the wrong counselors sometimes. What's the alternative? The psalmist says, "But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night." In Matthew chapter 5, we have some specifics about life and living the way Jesus would have us to live. And as we go through this short list that I want to show you, well, you might say, "Well, I know about that. I'm a Christian. I know about all these principles." Yes, but the question is, have you applied them to your marriage? I mean, today, are you applying these principles to how you treat your wife or how you treat your husband? There are some torpedoes the devil will shoot at your marriage, and perhaps is shooting today at your marriage. Let's start. I'm in Matthew chapter 5, and this is verse 22. The first torpedo is bitterness. Bitterness. Here's what my Lord said. "Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment." Now, wait a minute. Jesus said, you know that it's wrong to kill. Well, what's wrong with killing? Well, Genesis chapter 9 and verse 6 says, "Whoso sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed." Isn't that interesting? Even before the Ten Commandments, it was wrong to commit murder. Romans chapter 13 endorses capital punishment, as does this verse. And why? Well, Genesis goes on and it says the reason why capital punishment is right is because man was created in the image of God. I don't care how bad a man may get, he still has some of the image of God in him, and we ought to treat him with fairness. Now, what's wrong with murder? Murder is taking of innocent human life. Now, not all killing is murder. Can we just take a parenthetical note here? How would you define murder? What's murder? Here's my definition. Murder is the deliberate taking of innocent human life. So let's say that you go hunting. I've been hunting a few times. I've never so much as scared a deer, but I've tried. You know, I've gotten wet and cold, and I've held onto a rifle and wished for a deer. Never shot one. Never tried. Well, anyway, suppose a man kills a deer. Is that murder? No, it's not murder. Why? Because it doesn't fit the definition. It is the deliberate taking of life, but not human life. Suppose this afternoon you're driving your car and you come around a corner and someone steps off a curb and you hit him. You didn't mean to hit him, but you did, and you killed him. Is that murder? No, that's not murder. Why? Doesn't fit the definition. It is true that it's the taking of innocent human life, but it wasn't deliberate. What about capital punishment? Murder? No, that's not murder. Why? Because in a responsible judicial system, this is the deliberate taking of human life, but not innocent human life. What about abortion? Is abortion murder? Yeah. I mean, abortion as we know it today, of course, is because it fits the definition. It's the deliberate taking of innocent human life. Well, anyway, back to the text. Here's what Jesus said. You know that it's wrong to commit murder, but I say unto you, this is verse 22, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment, and whosoever shall say to his brother, Reka means you empty-headed one, shall be in danger of the council, but whosoever shall say, thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Here's what Jesus said. You know that it's wrong to commit murder, but you know what? I don't want you just not to kill a man. I want you to respect a man. I want you to show people respect and courtesy. And I say, I know that. I'm a Christian. I'm aware of that. I'm supposed to treat people right. Yeah, but what about my marriage? I mean, what about behind the closed doors of matrimony? Does the principle apply? So Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 32 says, be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. Is that how you act in your home? I mean, is that how you're treating your husband now? What about Luke chapter 17 and verse 3, where my Lord said, if your brother sin against you, rebuke him. If he repent, forgive him. But it gets harder. Ready? If he sins against you 7 times in a day, and 7 times he turns and says, I repent, you forgive him. I say, I'm good with that. I know that because I'm a Christian. Great. You apply it to your marriage? See, because somewhere along the line, in the church, Christians, we get the idea that I have a set of rules that's applicable to how I treat people out there, but behind my marriage door, you know, there's a different set of rules. I'm here to tell you that's not true. It's simply not true. You want to be a great husband? Be a great Christian. You want to be a great wife? Be a great Christian. Let's do another one. Drop down, I'm in Matthew chapter 5. Drop down with me to verse 27. You want to talk about what the devil will do to your marriage? Sometimes it has to do with lust. Jesus said, you have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you that whoso looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery already in his heart. What's wrong with adultery? Well, you stood before God and before those witnesses and you vowed holy matrimony. Adultery is a violation of that vow, a violation of that promise that you made. And Jesus says, you know that adultery is wrong, but I don't. I'm not saying just don't commit adultery. I want to take that a step further. I don't want you to look on a woman to lust after her. Let me tell you something. Pornography is a multi-billion-dollar business in America right now. Who would thought? When I was a kid, you know, it was true that pornography existed, but it wasn't like today because men who would want to use or purchase pornography had this problem. They had to find a place to buy it, and they risk somebody seeing them. I mean, I suppose you'd have to go to a place where those kinds of books or magazines were sold, or you had to go to some seedy theater somewhere where those movies were shown. But I think it had a built-in inhibition to it because of the fear of somebody finding out. But that's not true. I mean, if I were the devil, I'd do it this way too, wouldn't you? The devil found a way by which a man could participate in the sin of pornography and retain his anonymity. I mean, nobody knows. It's a victimless sin, if it's a sin at all, right? Nobody knows about this but me. Of course, the Lord knows about that. And let me just say this very plainly to you. I mean, if you really haven't been able to define this in your mind, may I just say it? The use of pornography is a sin. It's just a sin against God. The King James word that's applicable to this is lascivious. In Galatians chapter 5, in listing the works of the flesh, the Apostle Paul makes reference to adultery, fornication, uncleanness, and lasciviousness. And lasciviousness are those things which contribute to illicit sexual activity. And pornography is clearly in that category. I mean, he concludes that list by saying you can't go to heaven like this. I'm telling you that the use of pornography, the production of pornography, is a sin. Sin against God. And this idea, this notion that a man can use pornography and somehow he comes out from this unscathed is simply not true. I mean, it's a lie. The use of pornography is very much like the use of illegal drugs, barbiturates. I mean, you know how drugs work. A man takes some of that, uses some intravenously or orally or however he smokes it, however he takes it, and he gets this rush. He gets this feeling from that. But then there are a couple of issues he has to deal with. And one of course, is addiction. And that's how it is with pornography. But the other issue is that it's going to take more of the drug, or perhaps more serious drugs, eventually, before he can keep maintaining that same kind of buzz. And so it is with pornography, isn't it? I'm telling you, we're talking about something that is sinful, something that is addictive, something that'll... And you know what else? There's a great deal of marital conflict right now as a result of pornography. And what we've got to do is to determine men, I mean, if we're going to be real men, if we're going to be Christian men, if we're going to be sanctified men, what we've got to do is to decide, I will not view pornography. I will not deliberately view that. And then make a decision. I'm going to repent before God for this sin, and never more, never more. And then, now it may be that after a while you say, I'm back at it again. I thought I could stop, but I didn't stop. And then set up if that happens, then set up an accountability system. Find someone who can be your accountability partner. Somebody you trust, somebody in whom you have confidence, somebody you don't want to disappoint, and then set up a system by which every day you talk to that man, and in some way, I don't care if you use code language or how you express it, but some way express to that man, in the last 24 hours, I have not viewed pornography. And you keep that up for a series. I mean, this is not a 2-week thing. This needs to be 6 months. This needs to be 8 months. This needs to be a long period of time. And by, you can break this habit. You can break this, and you should, because Jesus said, I mean, can you just imagine a more apt description of what pornography is than this one? Where my Lord said, whoso looketh on a woman to lust after her, that is, for the purpose of lusting after her, and the word lust means inordinate desire for that to which I have no right. Whoso looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. Jesus knew what he was saying. He knew what he was saying. Let's go to the next one. Here's a torpedo, obviously, that the devil will shoot at your marriage. It's divorce. We live in a time right now that I never really expected in reference to marital conflict and divorce. I mean, the popularity of it. It's so amazingly common that we have segments of our society right now that have simply abandoned marriage altogether. I mean, where you have segments and they're sweeping large percentages where 80, 85% of the babies born in particular segments of the society are born to unwed parents. And they've just abandoned the notion of marriage altogether. I've been a few times to preach in Argentina. And in Pilar, why, some years ago, they enacted a law to try to minimize the numbers of divorces. The powers that be were concerned that there was too much divorce. And so what they did was to make a price on divorce. To get a divorce costs $1,000 US. Well, who's got $1,000 US around there? And so the idea was people aren't going to get divorces. And you know what? It worked. People quit getting divorces, but they didn't quit separating from their mates. The end result was, instead of divorcing, they just left mates and took up with someone else. No divorce, just taking up to live with someone else. And I wonder if we're any better. I wonder if we are. In Matthew chapter 19 and verse 9, Jesus said, "Whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, commits adultery. And whoso marries her which is put away doth commit adultery." We ought to cut divorce out of our dictionaries. I mean, you have a city block here, and on one end of the city block, you have a couple, and they're going to, I got some problems, they're going to divorce. Interestingly enough, at the other end of the block, you have another couple, and they've got exactly the same problems, but they're not going to divorce. They're going to stay together. What's the difference? But what's the diff? And the difference is commitment. Now listen to this old preacher. It is not your love that sustains your marriage. It's your marriage that sustains your love. Now, I want to throw out some practical, I call them practical P's, to help us stay away from divorce. Now, the secret about this in marriage is that you stay committed to your spouse to the degree that you don't ever get close to divorce. You don't ever get near that. And I'm telling you, you take two people who are dedicated to God, who want to be faithful Christians, they're not going to divorce. Here we go. Be present. Be present in your marriage. I know this sounds simple. I know, but it's a real mistake to ever choose to be apart from your spouse for long periods of time. Now, we're in a wartime, and I understand there are circumstances where it cannot be helped. I'm perfectly aware of that. And I'm so grateful for our military and for people who are sacrificing. I'm talking about occasions where a man and his wife just maybe it's lucrative. I have an offer of a position and it's lucrative, and I can be apart from my spouse, and I know there's going to be some months, but hey, we're going to make some real money. Let me tell you something, that's a mistake. That's because the devil's going to get that memo. In 1 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul writes about this, and he says, "Now I don't want you to be apart. If you have to be apart, if it's unavoidable, then let it be for a season." And he said, "Now then you come together again." Why? "That Satan tempt you not for your," and this is King James, "for your incontinency." It means your lack of self-control. Because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen is the devil will hear about that, and he will make sure that you face a temptation to be unfaithful to your spouse. I'm telling you, that's what's going to happen. It's what's going to happen. We need to be present. So what I'm suggesting is avoid opportunities. When it's a matter of choice to be apart for long periods of time, find something else to do. Find another way where you and your spouse don't have to be apart for long periods of time. I remember one Monday morning. I've been preaching for the church for quite a long time now, and on Monday mornings, it's not uncommon for me to take cards of visitors who have attended our assemblies, and I was going through them, and I got to one, and it was from my wife, and she'd checked this box that said, "Request a visit from the minister." Well, I knew I'd better go see that girl. We ought to be present. We ought to be protective. Be protective of your marriage. Now, adultery doesn't start in some bedroom. It doesn't start in some seedy hotel. Adultery typically starts in an innocent place with some sort of electric conversation that goes on between two people. Conversations, you know what I mean by electrics, where you have innuendos that are just sort of tossed out there to see if the other person will be receptive. Here's what I want you to do. Here's a rule. If you'll just make this rule, you know what? I believe you'll never commit adultery. Be protective of your marriage by this. Anytime you feel uncomfortable by something that is said, something that is done, maybe a violation of your personal space. We have a circle around us. Whatever it is. If you ever are uncomfortable around a member of the opposite sex, Here's what you do. Always say something right then in a positive way about your spouse. Always do it. Make it a habit. I don't mean to suggest that necessarily the other person is trying to be suggestive or is acting out of sort. I don't mean, maybe yes, maybe no. That's not the point. Anytime you feel ill at ease around a member of the opposite sex, just say something positive about your spouse. It's non-offensive. I was riding on an elevator one day in a hospital and riding up in the elevator. You know, you're not supposed to talk in an elevator. I don't talk. Riding up, this woman, just this woman and me, tall building, and we were going up on the elevator, and she said, you smell good. You know what? I really doubt that she meant anything by that, but that's rather personal. And so I said, why? I appreciate that. You know, my wife gave me that cologne. That's her favorite cologne. And she said, isn't that nice? Well, thank you. The door's open. You know, have a nice day, and that's what I'm talking about. What you do every time you feel ill at ease about something that is said or done by a member of the opposite sex, what I want you to do is to always say something positive about your spouse. Be positive in your marriage. Positive. Now, look, here's the rule. Ready? Here's a rule. Every day, I want you to find something that you can compliment about your spouse. Now, don't make something up. Cheap flattery is not so pleasant. Don't make it up. But find something that, sometimes husbands are not very good at this. Sometimes a husband, in fact, will do a very foolish thing, and that is to be critical of his wife in front of other people. Don't ever do that. You just say, well, I'm just teasing her. She knows that I don't mean anything by that. I'm only joking. Yeah, well, you know what? If you really want to help your marriage, do the opposite of that. I want you to find something every day that you can compliment about your wife or about your husband. And if you're smart, you'll do it in front of other people. There's something pretty wonderful about having a wife who compliments you in front of somebody else. You know, I mean, you might not say anything about it at the time, but there's something inside of you that just wells up with joy because she really admires me. She really cares about me, and it just feels mighty good. You want to avoid divorce? Be positive in your marriage. Be polite in your marriage. Polite. Where do we get the idea that if I'm married to you, I don't have to be polite to you? It's a funny thing about this to me. You know, you can, some of our men, we would be more polite to a stranger than to our wives. You say, oh, come on, Glenn, that can't be true. Well, suppose you walk up to a building and a door and there's a woman that just happens to walk up at the same time. You're going to open the door for her? Well, yeah. So sure I am. Well, did you open the door for your wife today? Do you? Make that a habit? Why do we think that if we're married to somebody, we don't have to say thank you anymore? Where do we get that idea? We don't have to say please anymore if we're married to them. Why not? Jesus said, I want you to stay away from divorce. I'm in verse 31 of Matthew 5. It hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you, that whoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery, and whoso shall marry her that is divorced commits adultery. Let's drop down to 38. What about this torpedo? Retaliation. Retaliation. Now see, here's a principle applicable to Christians, and we say, I understand that. I've always known that because I was raised up knowing Christian values, and so I know that I'm not supposed to practice retaliation. But I wonder about our marriages. Jesus said this. I'm in Matthew 5 and 38. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you that you resist not evil. Now, originally the idea of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth was to limit the execution of judgment. That is to say that don't go farther than an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth in the punishment of one who has committed a crime. Jesus said, but now, here's what I want for you. I don't want you to practice retaliation. I know that. I'm a Christian. I know that. And so if your enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirsts, give him drink, Romans chapter 12. And I know that, but I don't know about my marriage. I mean, what if you did something revolutionary and just unplugged unplugged retaliation from your relationship. You know how it goes, don't you? She says something ill, something rather sharp. And how do you respond to that, sir? You say something sharp back to her. She says something cutting to you. Well, the natural response. You know what happens? Well, you're a marriage counselor and somebody comes in and the point is that he has struck her. He physically struck her. And so you say to him, did you hit her? And he says, you know what he's going to say? Well, yeah, but she hit me first. And what he's saying is, you know what? I was justified. It was perfectly justifiable. It was something that, of course, anybody would. I had a license to do it because she smote me first. Right? That's not Christian. That's not what Jesus taught. My wife and I enjoy going to estate auctions. We don't get to go very often, maybe once a year, perhaps, I don't know, but it's always a lot of fun. And in fact, the southern states I enjoy the best because some of those auctioneers in Alabama and Tennessee can sing the auction, and it's just, they go to school for this. It's just wonderful talent and skill. Now, I want to ask you a question. Why do you think that someone who had a household of goods to sell, why would he pay an auctioneer? You know, there's a commission involved instead of just having a sale out in the yard. Why would he pay the money? Well, you know the answer to that is that he's apt to make more money selling things, employing an auctioneer than to do it in his yard. Why is that true? Well, because people often spend more at an auction. How does that work? Well, you come and you say, this is a great table. I could use a table like this. Isn't that a beautiful antique table? I think it's worth $150. I'm going to buy that table. And so the auction gets started and they sell a number of things and then they put your table up for sale and you bid $50 and somebody bids $75 and you bid $100 and somebody bids $125 and you say $150 and somebody over there bids $160. That wasn't supposed to happen. And so what do? You say $200. And you buy the table. Now I want to ask you a question. I thought you just said a moment ago that it was only worth $150. You were going to give $150, and you gave $200. Why did you do that? Well, you say, I don't know. I just got caught up in the auction and I bid too high. That's what happens. And that's why you're more apt to, in such a circumstance, to have an auction than just a sale, because you expect to make more money. Sometimes in marriage, you have a spat, and maybe she has PMS and she says something that is sharp and cutting. And so you retaliate. You say something back to her that is equally sharp and perhaps a bit more to teach her not to do that anymore. And she says something back to you and you say something back to her and she to you. And finally you say something that is just awful. And everything gets quiet and she says, you've been thinking that all along. And you know what? You really haven't. I mean, you just got caught up in the auction and you bid too high. You didn't mean to say that, but you just got wrapped up in it. And so here's my point, is that Jesus in Matthew 5 says, I don't want my people, my followers, to practice retaliation. I want you to shed that. And I say, I know that. I'm a Christian. Great. The question is it applicable to my marriage? I mean, are the principles regulating Christian living applicable to how I treat my husband or not? Is it right in reference to how I treat my wife? Let's do one more. Here's what Jesus said. I'm in verse 43 of Matthew 5. Ye have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. Now that's easy, isn't it? But I say unto you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. Pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. In other words, as a Christian, I really care about people, whether or not they're good to me. It's mighty easy to love somebody who loves you first. That's not the question. Anybody can do that. You don't have to be a Christian to do that. That's just as easy as falling off a log. But here's the challenge in Christianity. Can I be good to people who are unkind to me? Now, that doesn't mean that if I see my enemy walking down the street that I ought to run to him and hug him. That's not the point. The point is that despite the fact that he has treated me ill, you know what? If he needs help, I'm going to help him. It's not about what he is, it's about what I am. That's agape love. It's a Christian love. And it has an unconditional nature to it, to the degree that I can even love my enemies. Now I want to ask you a question. What about this unconditional love? Is that applicable to my marriage? Boy says, I'm going to get married. Wonderful. Do you love her? Do I love her? Have you seen her? She's beautiful. That face and that figure, and whoa, she drives me crazy. Beautiful girl. Yes. And I tell you, she can cook too. She's a great cook. And I tell you something else. Her daddy works at the corporation, got a very lucrative position. He's getting in at the ground floor, and I'm going to climb the ladder. And do I love her? Yes, I love her. Wonderful. So they get married. Well, what happens if in a couple of weeks you realize that she can't cook? That was her mama. Her mama was doing all that cooking. She can't boil water without burning it. She can't cook. And what happens if, God forbid, there's a terrible accident and that beautiful face and beautiful figure isn't so beautiful anymore? What if there's a downsizing in the corporation and Dad loses that lucrative position and now he and Mama want to come live with you? I want to ask you a question. Do you still love her? Do you love her? Well, I suppose that depends on the kind of love which you have. And my Lord described an agape love here. And I know that it's applicable to how I treat people outside, but I want to know, must I be a Christian inside the house? And the point is that the answer to marital conflict is that we be Christians. I mean, that we take these principles, these fundamental principles, and apply them to how we treat our spouses. When I was a kid, and I don't know if you remember this, but I don't know if kids use this terminology today or not, but when I was a teenager, sometimes the kids would use the phrase, going all the way. That was very sad. That's what they did not do. You know, I mean, they went part of the way and they debauched and besmirched something beautiful that God created for husbands and wives. But once in a while, you will see a man and his wife, and they've been married for 65 years. She's very ill. She's bedfast. Her little frame has shriveled to very little now. She weighs almost nothing, and her legs are in such a condition, well, she'll never, ever get out of that bed on her own strength anymore. And her mind is not so good anymore. And it's not uncommon for her not to know her husband. In fact, some days she wakes up and she looks at him and she says, "Excuse me, sir, could you find my husband for me? I need to talk with him." But I want to ask you a question. What's that husband going to do? Well, you know, he's going to get his chair and he's going to put it right beside that bed. And day in and day, I mean morning and noon and night, all night, he's going to be right there beside her. He's going to feed her and hydrate her and clean her and talk to her. He's going to be there for her despite the fact that she doesn't even know him. And I want to say, folks, that is going all the way. And that is what you and I should have for our goal in reference to our marriages. Would you just listen to this? It is not your love that sustains your marriage. It's your marriage which sustains your love. And if you want a great marriage, if you take two people who are compatible enough to get married in the beginning, and both of them decide that God's going to be number one and my spouse will be number two, let me tell you something, that marriage is going to last until one of you takes the hand of the other and gently puts it into the hand of God. My prayer and hope for you is that in this segment, I've stimulated some thought with the Sermon on the Mount. I know that the Sermon on the Mount is not really designed to talk specifically about marriage very much, but The principle is what I want you to get today, and I hope you'll take it home with you. The principle is that if you want to be a great husband, be a strong and faithful Christian. If you want to be a great wife, be a strong and faithful Christian. And may God bless your home. May God bless you through the conflicts, and may you, by the grace of God, be able to resolve the conflicts that you are fighting right now. And God bless you with a strong and happy marriage together until one day death parts you. Thank you very much.
What a message on a Christian response to marital conflict. Well, we want to remind you that you can see that lesson again a short time after this program airs. This is program number 510 of Good News Today. And if you'll go to our archives a short time after the program airs, you can see that lesson again from Glenn Colley, which was a part of the North Georgia Winter Lectures. We're featuring some of those lectures in special editions right now of Good News Today. And that was a special lesson indeed, wasn't it? And very, very practical and so very helpful, so desperately needed in the times in which we live. But if you'll go to our website and look for GNT 510 shortly after the program airs in our archive section there, then you can watch that program again, download it, share it with others. We'd be delighted for you to do that. Well, right now we are going to take a break, not only to give you some contact information because we'd like to hear from you here at Good News Today, but as we go to our break, as usual, we're going to remind you of some of the congregations that make Good News Today a reality.
All things are ready, come to the feast, come for the table now is spread. Ye famishing, ye weary, come, and thou shalt be richly fed. Hear the invitation, come whosoever will, praise God for full salvation, for whosoever will.
All things are ready, come to the feast, come for the door is open wide. A place of honor is reserved for you at the Master's side. Give the invitation to whosoever will. Come, give the invitation whosoever will. Praise God for full salvation, whosoever will, for whosoever will.
You may have questions or comments about Good News Today. We'd like to hear from you. Or if you would like to receive free Bible study materials, please contact us. Our mailing address is Good News Today, P.O. Box 206, Dunlap, Tennessee 37327. That's Good News Today, P.O. Box 206, Dunlap, Tennessee 37327. You may prefer to email us at goodnewstodaytv@gmail.com.
There is good news today.
That's goodnewstodaytv@gmail.com. Or call us toll free at 1-877-384-7221. That's 1-877-384-7221.
Always good.
We'd like to hear from you. Hearing from our viewers is always good news to us. Well, we would like to hear from you here at Good News Today. We do receive some very encouraging letters and emails from our viewers from various parts of the country, and we'd like for you to be among them. And incidentally, when you write to us, tell us how you are viewing Good News Today, whether on your local cable channel or whether it's on DirecTV or Dish Network, or whether you have the direct-to-home satellite system by which you can watch the entire Gospel Broadcasting Network, not just Good News Today, but the whole network, or the internet. You may be seeing us on the World Wide Web at gbntv.org. And incidentally, we want to remind you again to visit our website at gbntv.org. Remember, this program today is program number 510, number 510. And if you'll go there, and a few days after it's aired, not long after it's aired, go to the website and go to the Archives section. And at the Archives section, you can look under GNT, look for program 510. There are other Gospel Broadcasting Network programs there, of course, and you can choose from those and watch them again. Of course, as you go to the website, we stream live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so you will be able to see the network there. If you have high-speed internet, then you can view all of the programming on the Gospel Broadcasting Network. I want to mention, speaking of DirecTV, we are making a change. We've been talking about this. It's coming up very soon now, February 1st. On February 1st, those who have been watching us on Channel 323 of DirecTV will be able to see us then on Channel 225. Jot that down, make a note of that. Channel 225, beginning February the 1st, will be seen not only on a new channel, but at a new time. The time will be 9 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 9 a.m. Eastern Time on DirecTV, Channel 225. So glad that you've joined us for your daily dose of the best news ever. We appreciate so much your interest in spiritual things. Hope to see you next time.
Always good news, good news, good news. There is good news today. There is good news around the world. Always good news, good news, good news. There is good news today. All around the world. Good news around the world. Always good news, good news, good news. There is good news today.
Please join us.
Speech on. Selected. Volume. 44. Select. Hearing devices. Remote. Screen. Camera. Calculate timer. Flash. Selected. Brightness. Mute. Selected. Screen recording.